And honestly, the entire time while we were down in North Carolina, the only show that I watched, and I was very adamant about this, was The Wire.
I got to say.
Yeah. And I had never seen The Wire prior to, so it was wonderful because having hold on, Chad.
You meant that in front of Chad, bro.
I openly say this to Chad. It's so exciting to not only work with Chad on the project, but to also, just be in awe and be a fan of his work, and to put myself within that neighborhood, that experience, that community, throw myself into that world and just live as Kango, as an extension of The Wire. That was kind of my research.
Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversation at Home program. I'm Shon Fuller with the African American Film Critics Association. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the stars of The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster, Laya DeLeon Hayes, Chad L. Coleman, Denzel Whitaker, and writer-director Bomani J. Story. I'm gonna give it up for y'all.
Yay.
I wish I had a huge crowd behind me, because when I tell you I was thrilled in watching this entire story and absolutely loved it. Bomani, I'll throw the first question out to you, man. This is like a thriller, sci-fi drama about this brilliantly courageous young Black girl. What in the world made you write this story?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the literature, man. Like, I loved the book, and I just felt like there was something there. I wanted to tell it in a contemporary way, and you mix that with my muses, my two older sisters who mentored me my whole life, and just building it around that. That's where it all started. That's where the core of it came from. Okay,
cool. Any particular reason you chose these specific characters? And we'll get into that later, but why these characters to tell this story?
I mean, again, like just showing all the colors of the people in my life that I grew up around, and a lot of the the feelings that we have around, pun intended, but around the dinner table. You know what I mean? Like, these are the people who I grew up around and who I know. And so for me to kind of to add to that, and try to show the scope and the range of these people, I think was important to me, because I think a lot of times we get zeroed in on one track or like one type of character, and it's very flat. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to give a scope. We could see a lot of different angles here.
Right. You had me switching sides and everything, man. I was like, what's really going on?
Yeah.
It's funny. Do the characters themselves represent anything from you when you think of your creativity in a place where you write from? When I think about Vicaria or Donald or Kango, do they represent anything specifically?
To me personally?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, I think there's elements of a lot of my family, like, it's like I think of Vicaria, it's like when I think about her, it's like, of course, like my sisters are, are the muse for her, as well as, pieces of Aisha. And, my big sister, she was really weird when she was a kid, and I remember. So, Jada's like, like she did weird stuff when she was a kid. So, and, it's just like, so there's always going to be pieces of those, and even with Chad, whether it's like, I remember when I was in school and this, officer was kind of throwing me around and accusing me of stuff, like, my parents came up there to kind of check him, and so, it's just like that part of my family is like, it represents those kind of things. So for me, it's more coming from, a personal space, whenever I think about the elements of these characters.
Right. Well, you put together something I think a lot of us could relate to in the specific setting that you put it in. And you think about, I guess, whether it be drugs, violence, the death that surrounded the area. In some sort of sense, as I was watching it, it was still a community where you had this brilliant young Black girl who was able to grow up and flourish and be as brilliant as she was. I thought you did a fantastic job, which leads me to asking you, how in the world did you find this amazing cast to tell the story? Why these particular actors? And I'll ask them and jump in when it comes to Laya DeLeon Hayes. Give it up for you. You did an absolutely wonderful job bringing it together. Vicaria, I thought, amazing. From the braids to the attitude to the courageousness. Talk a little bit more about what your casting process was when it came to the audition, Laya.
Oh, for me, you said?
Yeah. I'm gonna throw that one to you. What was your audition like? Or how did you find out about the role? Or what was that whole story like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was an email in my inbox at first. That's all it was. I think what definitely struck out at the very beginning was the title was Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. And then they also had in the beginning of our scripts, like this really cool art that was in front of it. So also seeing that was extremely intriguing. I think, of course, I didn't want to play into any stereotype. And immediately when you read the character description and on top of that, you end up reading the script and the audition sides, it seemed like this was something much more than just those 3 words, Angry Black Girl on a page. And so it came as that first audition, and then I couldn't stop writing about her. I couldn't stop thinking about her mind and like what this obsession with death really was, where it was stemming from, and also just trying to figure out why she believed she could fully cure it. Also, if that was morally correct, like, could we even do that on film was another question like in my head. But the audition process was like the first audition, I think, was just a self-tape. And then I did a call with Bomani and I read with him, or whatever casting associate was at the time. And then we had a chemistry read, and that's where I first met Denzel. And I really got to see with Bomani how he was so open to just playing and wanting us to find the characters ourselves. He had a vision for what he wanted the story to be and what he wanted these characters to be, but gave so much flexibility and freedom to his artists and to his actors, which you can't really ask for anything more than that. So yeah, that was sort of the process. And then right after I found out I booked it, I had like 2, 3, 4 meetings with Bomani, and just thinking of how we were going to collaborate and seeing his vision made me so excited about the project, because I definitely had a lot of questions, as Bomani knows. And he was just, there was something about him and about the way that he saw this movie and this film that made it even more intriguing for me, and made me very excited to work with him.
From the moment you got the email to the time you were cast and you actually spent your first day on set, what was the time that passed?
Okay, so I think my first audition was in March, and then my first rehearsal day was like late May. So it was a good, like, I think the audition process maybe lasted for like 2.5, 3 weeks, maybe. And then once I found out I booked it, it was just prep up until that rehearsal, which was that second week of, or that second to last week of May.
Okay, now Laya, you mentioned this, and I'll also ask Chad and Denzel as well. You mentioned that you did a self-tape, and for every actor out there who's watching who hates self-tapes, how much time did you actually spend worrying about the lighting and the self-tape versus creating who Vicaria was?
Oh, I mean, for me, it's always on character. Like, I mean, I think the biggest thing is making sure you get Vicaria down, or you get whatever character you're playing down. That'll translate on camera, whether you're doing it on an iPhone or on a really nice HD camera.
Right.
I was really lucky because I found myself very fascinated by her from the beginning. So I couldn't stop like figuring her out. But in terms of my self-tape, as you said, there's so much effort that goes into doing lighting, finding a reader, and making sure that not only you have your job as an actor down, but also you're kind of working as some casting associate at the same time. So I ended up, what I did last year was I paid to go to some guy who did it for me, and he edited it. And even then it was a bit stressful because there's certain time limits that you also have to stay very close to.
Yes.
So that was definitely a struggle, but at the end of the day, you want to focus on how you're portraying the character and what the character means to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Chad Coleman, what you did with Donald, I thought was phenomenal. You can play a very complicated man. You can, hands down, no matter where I find you. I was like, this brother brings the heat. What was the whole casting process like for you, or auditioning process?
I don't want to sound.
Nah, man, go ahead.
Been around a long time.
Tell me what it is.
Simply say it was an offer. It was an offer for me. It was not an audition. So I was fortunate enough for this young man to have seen my work and believe that I was the man to play Donald. And then personally, what I did when it came across my desk per se, I called up. I looked at they sent the link and everything. There was a story. I think it was a Deadline story maybe about and so I read that story and boom, there was Denzel. I said, oh shoot, Denzel's a part of this. So what do? You call your brother, So we had done a couple of personal projects together already, and I respect his artistic integrity, through the roof. And he's a great director too. If you don't know, but you should know. So once I had the conversation with him, the way he laid it out, it was a no-brainer to me because I was already all in with what was going down, It's like when you can revisit a classic and then bring all of these social political implications, not even implications, but just straight up in your face. This is what it really is. This is what's going down. We taking it on. I'm that guy. I mean, I want to march with that dude, because so often I love escapism, of course, but come on, sometimes when you're able to take a classic that's full of a lot of escapism, even though many other cultures can draw different things from it, I understand it. But to be able to bring our culture to this piece in the way that he did, I saw it. I saw it on the page. I understood it. Or just from my own lens, what was resonating for me, that title, The Angry Black Girl and the Monster, that what resonated with me, this is how you see us. This is all you see. I'm not saying that that's not a part of it, but is that all you see? Why is that the totality of it? And so he, was bringing these multi-layered characters. These are the people I know. I mean, and coming from, being able to do The Wire, like that was the main thing with The Wire. It's like, these people, you may say they're stereotypical, they're in marginalized places, they may be stereotypical, but guess what? They're three-dimensional human beings. You don't walk away bemoaning that they're stereotypes. You walk away hurt. It's so, and you talk about complex. That's how complex it is. You know what I mean? You walk away celebrating. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, brother. I mean,
when I saw you appear on screen, because I hadn't read any credits, I just clicked play and watched it.
Yes.
And I was like, is that Chad? Well, no, that's not Chad. I said, this brother is shape-shifting right in front of my eyes. Literally. But sometimes when you do the work like you do in other works, that could have been part of your audition process. You could show up and do the work. It was just brilliant, man. I enjoyed watching you.
Thank you, brother. Much appreciated. I have a responsibility. I am a father, I have a brother whose whole life has been about having to negotiate substance abuse and things of this nature. I'm from a community that is very much what's reflected in this movie. I'm from that community, for sure. Richmond, Virginia, no question about it. Go to Creighton Court. That's where I was born and raised. You know, this is the realness, you know, so when you take it on in this adept way that this brother took it on, I just again, kudos, and people need to see it. See, sometimes you got to serve it up a certain way for them to really get it, you know?
Well, let me
connect.
ask you this, because you done jumped all the way in. So since we're here, when you think about who Donald was as someone who lost his wife to violence and then lost his son to violence,
yes,
and then started using to actually be able to cope and still try and be a parent.
Yeah.
You saw the humanness in Donald and how you wanted to take care of your daughter and how you showed up to class and protected her. Talk about the importance of still showing up even in the struggle. It's May, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. How do you?
You just hit it. People think it's either or.
Right.
But the struggle is a layered struggle because in his heart, what resonated most to him was family. But yes, he's a flawed man. He's not a superhero. He doesn't need to be a superhero. What he needs to do is try to take personal responsibility for the challenges he's facing. He's also having a difficult time dealing with the level of angst and vulnerability that he's experiencing. So yes, to choose to self-medicate, that's the message that has to be out there though. Listen, is that the way? Is that a viable option? Really, no. But you see him trying to move out of that space. So that's where it becomes an inspirational character. I did get here, but did I sit here? Did I stay here? Am I trying to move to a different place? And that's what you do see with Donald, which I love the most. And I'm telling you, a lot of people who have big hearts, see, when you feel deeply, sometimes it's overwhelming. It's hard to negotiate that level of pain. So you may make that choice, which is not, no, it is not the best choice for you. And to be your best self, you got to be able to sit with that level of vulnerability and be okay. Because it's really, really coming from love. It's really coming from love. So it's okay. But to see him move through it, you attempting to move through it is the way to me.
Right. Cool. Mr. Whitaker, Denzel Whitaker, man, Kango was a challenge for me, I'll admit. And I absolutely loved him, man, because at the beginning I was like, really? And then at the end I was like pulling for him and I was like, I'm confused. I don't know how to feel about this. How did you pull that off, man? When it came to Kango, when you saw him, what was your process like when you first met him on paper and to actually bringing him to life?
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Honestly, Kango was a challenge just because for myself, it's playing against type. And, you know, as a performer, you want to be able to do anything and to lose yourself into the role. But, you know, sometimes you got to look at the material and see, well, how best can I lose myself in the role, or how can I find the nugget, the nuance? How can I find the truth and the reality of this character so you can portray it? And originally, you know, as you say, when I met Kango on paper, it was a little not only baffling, but a little off-putting, only because, you know, you don't want to perpetuate this idea, this stereotype that this is what Black men are like within the community. You don't want to keep putting forth the example of just like, oh, you know, we're used to seeing gangbangers, drug dealers, et cetera, for our Black men, you know, seeing this depiction on screen continuously. So it really, for me, came down to what was the active voice behind Kango, who was Kango, and what are the intentions. You know, for me, the big difference maker was actually having a conversation with Bomani. You know what he wanted to do with Kango, or what he had envisioned, not just for Kango, but also Donald and you know, Vicaria, and all of the wonderful characters of this story. You know, making three-dimensional characters who are all flawed in a way, who are all suppressed by their circumstances, but they have depth and humanity to them.
Right.
That for me was really exciting. That's how I was able to start to approach Kango.
Okay.
Of course, then you start to peel back the layers and think, okay, well, if you have, say, for so your right hand man Jamal, who's like this big, brawny, intimidating dude. I mean, Keith on surface compared to me is like two whole versions of me put together. So it's like, all right, well, how now do I, have a commanding presence over this dude? And it really, once we started peeling back the layers and Bomani and I started having, in-depth conversations, it was about, okay, his intellect, who he is as a person, this hidden quality behind Kango that he almost reserves and doesn't necessarily show the people around him. He has this facade that he basically puts on, so he can be intimidating, or so he can, provide for his members within the community. But at the same time, too, there's this gifted quality that he possesses. And once we sort of were able to sort of tap into that gem, that's how I was able to really find the source of Kango, breathe life into him. And honestly, the entire time while we were down in North Carolina, the only show that I watched, and I was very adamant about this, was The Wire.
I got to say.
Yeah. And I had never seen The Wire prior to, so it was wonderful because having hold on, Chad.
You mentioned that in front of Chad, bro.
I openly say this to Chad. Chad is a brother. And we got to work together, and we built a bond just off of brotherhood. And the same with my brother Maestro. Like Maestro's in the fourth season, and that's like one of my best friends. And it's like, oh man, everybody regards the work. And for me, it was like, well, I know these brothers as people, so finally I get to watch them on screen. It's so exciting to not only work with Chad on the project, but to also, just be in awe and be a fan of his work, and to put myself within that neighborhood, that experience, that community, throw myself into that world and just live as Kango, as an extension of The Wire. That was kind of my research.
Bomani, that'll put me back at you and ask you this question. How important was it for you to bring on actors who could not only give life to these characters you created, but also connect as a unit? And what did you do to create this safe space on set every day?
It was always important to me to make sure that whoever's being cast, is, when they look at the material they're bringing, they're not just trying to execute what's on the page. I told them, I said 1,000 times when we were on set, I told this to the actors, and I told it to the crew, it's like, if we capture exactly what's on the page, then we have failed, And so always searching for those elements of an actor who's, intuitive and bringing, different things to this. It's just like, there's small things, for instance, like, during that exchange between Donald and the teacher, and, you see Vicaria just kind of give a, I don't know how else to say it, but an FU to the teacher through a look, right? Where she, you know what I mean? And it's just like, that's not written, like, that's
right.
As Leia sitting there listening, and you know what I mean, and reacting and being in the moment, which is what you want. And that's just something very small, but it means a lot, when you watch it. So like, to me, I
had the sense that her dad was going to have her back no matter what.
Yeah.
Simply by how she looked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so much about the relationship, So I'm always searching for that. And then when it comes to just trying to build the camaraderie, it's like, I'm a big rehearsal guy. Like, I love rehearsals. I think it helps you not only just like find the scene, but it also builds a repertoire between you and the actors. It's just like, at least I hope, So I love rehearsing, and I love just figuring it out. And it's more than just trying to figure out the scene. Like I said, it's also, us getting to know each other, me understanding what are your fears, what are your questions, what are your thoughts, it's just like, and just creating a very transparent relationship. So it's like, so I understand there's certain things just like, hey, look, I'm not vibing with this. And I was like, okay, hey, let's, what's a different choice, right? Like, what's a different way we can do this, and being open to that. Because I think a lot of decisions that, you know, it's just like that they're bringing to the table, you know, are valid. And I want to know that you're going with confidence.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if you're rejecting something, even if it's my idea, you know, and I want it or whatever, it's just like, it's not going to work if you don't like it. Right. It's like, and you don't accept it. So it's like, what do you want to do? What do you accept? What is coming from you? You know what I mean?
Is there any point for the actors, whether it be Laya, Chad, or Denzel, that you got overwhelmed?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, how did you work through that process to keep pushing through the uncomfortable parts of creating these characters?
Like an overwhelming moment? Like,
yeah, and that could be to Laya, Chad, or Denzel.
Yeah.
But for me,
like, did anybody ever?
For me, it was just the dinner table when I was telling her, you know, baby, I'm gonna get it together. I'm gonna turn this around. You know, that moment for me was like really, yeah. That was a hell of a moment for us, as I remember it. And the other one was, you know, having to fight what used to be my son.
No, spoilers.
My son's a pretty style.
He was strong. He was strong.
I think
honestly, the moment of opening that door and seeing them, you know, right? You said don't give things away. Okay, sorry. you know what I'm talking about. Like when he was, you know, opening the door of the bedroom, I'll leave it like that. That was a real, oh man, you know, just you know, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The relation. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Laya.
Yeah, I mean, that relationship certainly with Chris was, I know before even starting, and we ended up doing rehearsals with Adam, who plays Chris. But before then, I was really nervous about how that dynamic was going to play out with him coming back as the creature. Like our first rehearsal we had was, and I hope I'm not giving too much away, but it's when he basically comes back to life, and Adam got to figure out the types of movements or sounds that he was going to make as this creature. And then as Vicaria, it's just, how do you react to that? Especially seeing your brother, who's not, it's almost like a new birth in a way, or a rebirth in a way. So trying to understand how their relationship has now shifted was certainly a challenge at first. And then I will say, and Bomani remembers this too, separating like the prep process versus actually getting to set and just staying very present in the moment. That was certainly a challenge just as a person, as an actor, but with a lot of guidance from Bomani, I was able to like stay present and go scene by scene. And not leading a project before, there were so many thoughts going into my head, a lot of like nervous energy. And by day one, I think something had clicked in my mind where I was like, no, I got it. It was just completely trusting instinct. And sometimes that can be the hardest thing as an actor, is just trusting your gut.
Yeah,
you did your thing.
Yeah, I remember that, because you know, it's just like, and you can stop me, but Leo, whatever. But it's like, because I remember she was asking questions about everybody except for herself, right? She's like, yeah, but what about him? What about this one? I was like, damn, you got a lot of questions for everyone, but your own character. But I like, you know, it's like,
he's like, I wanted answers. And yeah, and he was like, just figure it out.
So one of my favorite, most memorable scenes, I'll say, and I don't know if it's how you directed it or between Laya and Denzel, how y'all pulled it off, but y'all had this like machine gun battle conversation or debate or fight.
Yeah, that was great.
And I was like, what? And I was so caught up, like, how prepare for that rapid fire. Was it a lot of rehearsals there? And is that what you had in mind when you directed it, Bomani?
So that scene, we weren't able to rehearse that scene, you know. But I don't remember them too, because they came up to me. They had a lot of questions about that. Like, what the hell is going on in this scene? That was a tough scene to shoot too, you know. I think we dialed it down, you know, when we were in there. I think the word that clicked them both when they were just kind of like, all right, we got it. You can go away now, right? Like,
right.
Is when we were talking, and, you know, I think it was accountability. And then I don't know what it did, but it unlocked it for both of them. But that was, you know, that's another moment where I definitely feel like, you know, capturing exactly what's on the page wouldn't necessarily be what happened in that scene. You know, that was the pure force of Laya and Denzel standing on this material and adding so much to this scene itself. You know what I mean?
Right. Speaking of, like, I guess your layers of character, when I think about Kango, he had one statement that went something like, I'm the one helping them to live.
Oh, I'm the one keeping your family alive?
Yeah, I'm the one keeping your family alive.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it reminded me of the dealers in a lot of neighborhoods who are looked up to by the young people and by that community as a person who's trying to hold that whole community together. That was jarring, and it I think that was a change for me that made me like kind of want to pull for him.
Yeah.
And it helped me to humanize him in that way. Any thoughts on how or what that meant to you? Or I don't know if that was a specific line that you put in there, Bomani or Denzel, how you pulled it off.
Well, the interesting thing about that scene is you know, there's a battle of wits going on. Particularly, you know, because both characters at odds, they have something that they need to gain out of each other.
Right.
You know, obviously on the surface, there's one thing where Kango seems to be looking for something externally, but internally he's trying to figure out, well, who is this character of Vicaria? And there's a challenge because Vicaria is basically stepping him, being like, you know, you're not as smart as you think you are. And when those wits go to battle, when they go to head, that line in particular that you reference is really like a trump card. And it's one of the things that Bomani and I talk about often, you know, alluding back to the idea of who is Kango, you know, who were the people that preceded before him, the OGs, you know, who were his pops or his mom, you know, what did they mean to this community? And again, in certain regards, you know, Kango is a victim of circumstance, but he's also taking that circumstance and he's providing certain means throughout the community. You know, on surface, it may not look like he's, you know, doing good. And it's not to sit here and justify his actions, but, you know, a lot of OGs back on the block, when they started gangs, you know, were a way of protecting the community. You know, when you think about organized crime and whatnot, it's really looking for the infrastructure. So, you know, externally, we might look at, you know, certain factions per se, and we can judge them based on some of the crime and atrocities that they find themselves in. But there is this core value of almost looking out and helping one's own. And that's where Kango's moral compass kind of comes to the forefront. And he's also using it as a threat of don't step out of line, because I know your family, I know this community, you're still a little wet behind the ears. Whereas, like, you think you're smarter than me, but I'm also providing a means and helping other people to cope. And also to your pops came to me.
Right. I have about 3 minutes left in what I want to be a whole nother hour conversation about this. And I'm going to throw my last question to Laya, who I think did a wonderful job.
Yes.
When I first thought about it, I was like, wow, this girl is fearless. And And then I was like, well, it's not that she's fearless, because fear is there, but it's just, this girl is really courageous.
Well, one, I just want to say thank you so much. That really does mean the world to me. And to answer your question, I believe it's just that love of family. Like at the end of the day, that's where it truly was stemming from, was this wanting and this knowing that she needed to put the pieces together to bring back her family.
Literally.
Oh, what was that?
Literally.
Literally, exactly.
Literally.
Exactly. So it's that feeling of, especially when you're young, and we get to explore grief in this film, and how it's fully affected her wholeheartedly, and how she almost has tunnel vision when she's on this journey of curing death, and that family is right in front of her. And again, she's just trying to put the pieces together in any way that she knows how. And Kango, Jamal, even Aisha and her different perspective, her different mentality towards death and curing it is not going to stop Vicaria. And also, I think what's really beautiful in this film, again, is that relationship between Vicaria and her father, that we certainly see in that scene with the teacher, where I'm giving that like F you look, because I know that my dad's going to be there to support me. He's going to have my back in it. And even just having that one person there where she knows, okay, well, I have that support, that goes into the confidence that she has as a person and being able to be so courageous in times of fear. Yeah, so I would say that, again, there's so much that comes with grief. There's obviously hopelessness and not knowing what to do with all those emotions inside, but that courage and that like marching to the beat of her own drum, that's what keeps her hopeful, that knowing that, okay, well, if I bring my brother to life, my family will be back together and it'll all come back. So,
well, thank you all for joining us today. It's so appreciated. I'm so glad that I got to have this conversation with you. On behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, your process of craft with your fellow performers. Give it up to you all.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.